In the dark, damp alleys of medieval Europe, the air was thick with the stench of decay and the whispers of the forbidden. In those days, the study of the human body was a risky business, often conducted under the cover of night. Imagine a group of young medical students, their faces pale and eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity, gathered around a dimly lit table. On that table a body lay, its skin already beginning to turn a sickly shade of green. This was not a scene from a horror movie. It was the reality of early anatomy lessons. In the early days, anatomy was not the systematic study of the body that we know today. It was more like a desperate, sporadic attempt to answer specific questions. The occasional opening of a body was a rare and hurried affair, driven by the urgency of time and the lack of proper facilities. The bodies used for these dissections were usually those of executed criminals, and even then, they were in short supply. The lack of refrigeration meant that dissections had to be conducted quickly before the body decomposed, making it a race against time. One of the most influential figures in this early period was Mondino de Luzzi, a professor from Bologna. In 1316, he wrote a compendium of anatomy that combined the teachings of the ancient Greek physician Galen with some insights from Arabic authorities. This book dominated the teaching of anatomy for 2 centuries. Mondino's approach was practical but limited. He described the organs in the abdominal cavity first because they were the most perishable and had to be dissected quickly. Then, he moved on to the bones, the spinal column, and the extremities. Despite his efforts, Mondino's work was still riddled with errors, many of which he had borrowed from the animal anatomy described by Galen. He did not add much visually to the field, and his methods were far from ideal. The practical obstacles to the study of anatomy were numerous. Dissections were rare, often conducted only once a year or every 2 years. The lack of proper lighting and the rush to complete the dissection before the body decomposed made it difficult for students to fully understand what they were seeing. Vesalius, a prominent anatomist of the 16th century, described the chaotic scene of a dissection. A crowded room, dimly lit, with bleary-eyed students who barely had the time to ask questions or reflect on what they were seeing. The professors often read from books they had memorized, rather than conducting the dissection themselves, leading to a disconnection between theory and practice. The scarcity of bodies for dissection was a significant issue. In England, the bodies of executed criminals were the only ones legally available for study. Hanging was the usual method of execution, but some people of high status were decapitated. In Venice and other parts of the continent, beheading was more common. Mondino's textbook even instructed students to begin the dissection with a body that had died from decapitation or hanging. This skewed the students' view of the human body, as the cadavers were often damaged from the execution process. To overcome the shortage of bodies, resourceful professors like Jacobus Silvius and Vesalius resorted to extreme measures. Silvius, Vesalius' teacher, would carry body parts in his sleeve, a practice that was both unhygienic and offensive to his students. Vesalius himself went to great lengths to gather specimens, often illegally. In one instance, he and a colleague, Gemma Frisius, found a partially burned and roasted cadaver along a country road. Vesalius, driven by his desire to study the human body, climbed a stake in the middle of the night to retrieve the bones. He even convinced the city officials that he had brought the skeleton from Paris to avoid incriminating himself. The risks were high, and the methods were often gruesome. Medical students were rumored to steal bodies from graves and dispose of the remains in rivers or feed them to dogs. In 1597, a Padua ordinance required a public funeral for the parts of every dissected body, a testament to the widespread concern over the ethics of body snatching. Despite the challenges, Vesalius recognized the importance of verifying anatomical knowledge through direct observation. He began to question the accuracy of Galen's texts, which he had been teaching. Galen's anatomy, he realized, was based on the dissection of animals rather than humans. This revelation led Vesalius to produce a new anatomy text, based entirely on his own observations of the human body. His groundbreaking work, De Humanis Corporis Fabrica, The Structure of the Human Body, was published in 1543 and quickly became a cornerstone of anatomical study. Vesalius was meticulous in his approach. He knew that the scientific value of his work depended on the quality of the illustrations. He sought out the best artists and woodblock cutters to ensure that his observations were accurately depicted. The illustrations in the Fabrica were a significant improvement over previous texts, which often relied on verbal descriptions that could be confusing and imprecise. Leonardo da Vinci, a contemporary artist and anatomist, had warned against the limitations of verbal descriptions, emphasizing the importance of visual representation. Vesalius' Fabrica was a revolutionary work that changed the way anatomy was studied. It was divided into 7 books, each focusing on a different system of the human body. The book began with the bones, the basic structure of the body, and then moved on to the muscles, the vascular system, the nervous system, the abdominal organs, the thorax and the heart, and finally the brain. Vesalius emphasized the importance of hands-on learning, encouraging students to see, feel, and decide for themselves. He used a piece of charcoal to mark the shape of the skeleton on the flesh of the cadaver, helping students understand the internal structure of the body. The Fabrica was not just a scientific text, it was also a work of art. The detailed illustrations and the clarity of the text made it a valuable resource for both students and practitioners. Vesalius' work was so influential that it began to replace Galen's texts in European medical schools within a few decades. The study of anatomy was transformed, and the importance of repeated, comparative dissections was emphasized. However, the customs of the time and the continuing prejudice against dissection still posed challenges. Vesalius faced criticism and even rumors that he dissected bodies before they were dead. Despite these challenges, he continued to revise and improve his work. The second edition of the Fabrica, published 12 years later, included crucial corrections and updates. Vesalius' legacy was not just in his discoveries, but in the path he opened for future students. He showed that the study of anatomy required a new approach, one that emphasized direct observation and the willingness to challenge established beliefs. His work laid the foundation for modern anatomy and inspired generations of medical students and researchers to continue the pursuit of knowledge. In the end, Vesalius' contributions to the study of anatomy were profound. He transformed a field that was once dominated by speculation and error into a science based on empirical evidence and direct observation. His work, the Fabrica, remains a testament to his dedication and the importance of questioning established knowledge. The study of the human body would never be the same again, and the legacy of Vesalius continues to influence medical education and research to this day.